In your project worksheet, you have a specific worksheet on the left-hand side called the financial toolboxes, and this will just be an informal video to try to get you acquainted with which calculators to use when and how to properly get numbers in the appropriate way. So on the right-hand side, I've put a little temporary whiteboard up here with a set of assumptions. So let's jump in and try it out. Assume that you invest $100 monthly into a Roth IRA retirement account that earns on average 7% compounded monthly interest. You start with a lump sum of $250 and would like to estimate your final balance after 40 years. Well, as you look at the different calculators, we have 8 total different ones we've set up for you. The one that would come to mind, I would hope, would be the future value, we call it. And that's because we're trying to estimate a final balance. So I'm going to carefully type in my inputs. We've got a 7% compounded monthly APR there, and a present value. Two different ways to type in the present value, which would of course be the lump sum of $250. You could type in 250 as a positive or as a negative. So let's do it in the more technical way as a negative. And that simply means we're writing a check and putting the money out the door. We call that outflow, and therefore it's a negative. Well, if we go with that idea, then the payment also needs to have the same sign. It too needs to be a negative, and that's going to be a $100 monthly payment. So I'm going to make that a $100 outflow as well. And then finally, we need the number of years, and that's just simply 40. And this gray box down in the bottom of the right-hand corner of each calculator represents the ending amount, assuming that your inputs are valid. So we see that we have over $266,000 waiting there in the retirement account if things were to go according to plan. Notice if I were to just simply change that to a positive 250 lump sum with a $100 monthly payment, we get the same amount. It's just that it's in reverse. It's going to be a negative, and so you have this issue of inflow and outflow to deal with when you're working with Microsoft Excel. Not a big deal if you remember that it's a negative is always outflow and a positive is inflow. And so I have some examples here, and there's some rules of thumb, I guess I call them, to help you understand the cash flow model. So as I scroll down, I just wanted to call it to your attention that we have 4 comments here that'll help you, as well as 2 graphics. So give that some time to think about, and that's always available to you on this worksheet. Likewise, we have available the very functions that are in the gray boxes. Now we have the worksheet password protected. The password is BYUI, if I remember right. But that's simply to remind you that you don't want to go in and accidentally type something on top of the gray boxes. So just only put the outputs in the white boxes and you'll be in great shape. And if you're curious about what formulas we're using, they're right here, all 8 of them. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. We'll go on to the next one. Okay, in our second example, let's take a look here. Assume that you are curious about how long it would take you to achieve a final balance of, say, $250,000, $250,000, if you knew that you could invest $75 monthly into an investment account earning on average 8% compounded monthly interest. You don't have a lump sum to begin with in the investment. So obviously this is about how long it's going to take, and so that would lead me to this particular calculator that we have here called years at the bottom. So I'm going to carefully type in the 8%, make it compounded monthly. There is no lump sum to begin with, so I'll keep that at 0. And notice if I don't include a negative, if I just put straight up $75 for the payment with a future value of $250,000, you'll notice that I get an error, and it's waiting for a correction in the number inputs. So either I put in a negative 75 or I put in a negative 250,000. It's got to be one or the other. That's a good rule of thumb, is you must have a negative somewhere. And notice that it's 39.4 years to achieve that goal. Now, something I didn't mention in the first calculator with future value is it's vital to understand that the number of compounds in Microsoft Excel must always match the number of payments you make. So notice if I come up here into the 12 compounds and put in a 24, you'll see the number of years drop down, which makes sense because that would imply that not only are you compounding bi-monthly, you're also making a $75 payment bi-monthly. So twice as many payments, compounding twice as fast, would take less time to reach your target. If you really got dramatic and put in 365 compounds, you must remember that also implies 365 daily payments of $75 each, and so dramatically the number of years would shrink to 6.9. Well, we made a little correction on our template just recently, and if your template doesn't allow for that, it might be because if you were to look at the actual formula, it most likely is not dividing by F6, which is the compounds, but it's probably dividing by 12, a hard type number, and likewise down here in the description box. So just remember, if you have an older copy of the template, simply use the BYUI password and take the password off temporarily and go in and fix that, make it F6. And that way it talks to this very cell right here as a result. So hopefully that'll help you to feel comfortable with how the years toolbox works. And what we'll do next is we'll take a look at the difference between investment interest and debt interest, and hopefully things will start to make sense to you. Talk to you in just a little bit as I change my whiteboard up.